When I look back at all the times that I successfully made a big change in my habits and just in my life, I can see that a common thread was that I changed a part of my identity. Shifting your identity is one of the most powerful drivers of changing your habits and really just how you show up in general. But I find when people tend to talk about this concept, it typically feels so vague and confusing. So in today's video, I want to break it down in what feels like a practical and tangible way, so it feels like you can start shifting your identity today. So let's get into it. Hi, and welcome to the next video in the Becoming 2.0 You series. This is a series that is dedicated to helping you change your habits and show up for yourself in the ways that you want to. So if that is something you are interested in, make sure to subscribe and stick around. So why is this even important? Your identity has a major influence on what you do and how you show up on a day-to-day basis. Your identity shapes what you believe is possible for you, what you do consistently, how you show up for yourself, and how you interpret the circumstances that you end up finding yourself in, right? Your day-to-day reality. Unconsciously, we tend to act in alignment with how we see ourselves and what we believe about ourselves, right? Our self-concept. And typically, when we try to work on a goal or change our habits or show up in a new way, we tend to do so from a place of not changing our identity. So we're doing so with the same self-concept of the version of ourselves who did not do those things or show up in those ways. And that just makes it so much more likely that we're going to revert back to our typical way of being. So if we want to change an area of our lives, this can be such an important part of the equation because it will be so much easier to actually make a change and sustain that change if we actually become a different version of ourselves. If you are carrying the identity of, I always fall off track, I'm just really bad at consistency. I'm just not the type of person who likes eating healthy. I'm such a foodie. I can't give up junk food. I'm so bad at getting myself to work out. I'm just a procrastinator. That's just who I am, right? If you hold one of those kinds of identities, that is going to make it 10 times harder for you to make the changes that you want to see. You are going to be so much more likely to continue to align with those self-concepts. And I think a really helpful way to process this is to look at it as you have your identity and you have your behaviors, and there is just one giant feedback loop between them. So whatever identity you hold, that has a major influence on your actions and what you do. But what you do, your actions, behaviors, your habits, the whole 9 yards, that has a huge impact on your identity. That influences what you believe about yourself and your self-concept. If you see yourself as someone who does not like to eat healthy, you are so much more likely to make choices that do not feel healthy, which reinforces that identity, which continues to reinforce those behaviors, and so on and so forth. If you hold the identity of, I am someone who keeps a clean and tidy space, you are so much more likely to clean and tidy your space more often, reinforcing that identity, reinforcing those behaviors, and again, that just repeats. And I bring this up because we can take both sides of this feedback loop in making shifts in your identity, as well as making changes in your habits and behaviors to help you make the changes that you want to. And you might be listening to this or watching this and feel like, but that really is just who I am. But it is so important for you to know that you are not stuck as you are. Who we are is nothing set in stone. It's not concrete. We can always shift and change in certain ways. And really the first step to being able to truly make any kind of change is believing that you can change. You really have to believe that you can change aspects of yourself. And this process is really not just telling yourself, okay, I'm taking on this new identity today, and then you're just gonna automatically show up differently. It really is something that does take conscious effort as well as repetition. It takes a claiming of, this is who I am now. This is how I'm seeing myself. This is the person I am. Potentially changing some of your inner dialogue to help support that. And then showing up as that version of you, really embodying that new identity and showing up in those ways until it becomes naturally just who you are. So for the rest of this video, we're going to dive deeper into how to take on a new identity in a tangible way, how to support that new identity, and tips that will help you actually hold it. So starting with choosing the new identity. Now you can think about and dream of this entire new version of you that you want to become and step into. I am all for that. And I have also found for myself that I have actually found more success with making a big change in my identity when I've gotten very specific about maybe 1 to 3 aspects of it, rather than I am this whole new person now. And I really think a main part of that is just It's so much easier for the brain to focus on a few specific things rather than truly becoming this entire new person. Not to say that that's not possible. So you can get a feel for and dream up, what is that version of you that you do want to step into? What kind of things does she do? How does she feel? What is her vibe like? What does she feel like? But I also recommend really looking at the very specific things that you are looking to change. What are the specific habits you want to change? What are the goals that you have? And what specific actions does that involve? And then using that as the identity you're taking on. You are now becoming the version of yourself who does those things, or at least some version of it. And if you are following along with this series, go back and look at what you wrote down from the very first video of the specific actions that you are aiming to do and what you chose that you are going to be prioritizing. And that is the identity that you are taking on, being the version of yourself who does those things. So this can look like, I am someone who prefers nutrient-dense foods. I am someone who now stops eating when I'm full. I'm someone who cleans my kitchen before I go to bed. That's just who I am. I go on a walk every single day. That's just who I am. When I have things to do, I sit down and just get it done. That's just the type of person I am. And as you're doing this part, I really have 3 main tips for you. Number 1 is to pay attention to the language that you use and just notice how it feels. This should be something that you feel like you can believe or take on, at least to some degree. So for example, maybe saying something like, I am someone who is super fit, feels more like an affirmation that's full of hopeful manifestation. But maybe saying something like, I am the type of person who works out even when I don't feel like it, feels more doable. Or something like, I am someone who enjoys exercise. Or I am someone who prioritizes moving my body. It's okay if it feels like a stretch. It's just something, again, that you feel like you can, at least to some degree, feel like you can believe. Feels like you can, in a way, act like that person and take that on. Tip number 2 is if you feel like you know what you might be striving for in a way, what kind of goals you have or what kind of overall change you want to see, but you're not really sure what that identity might look like or what those habits and mindsets might look like, find people who have done what you want to do. Find people who have successfully achieved the kind of outcome that you want and then use them as an example. Pay attention to the types of things that they do, and especially the types of things they say. How do they talk about things? How do they problem solve? Oh, they're not always motivated to go to the gym. They go even when they don't feel like it. I can be that person too. Oh, this thing happened to them, but they didn't really let that bother them at all. I can be that person too. Other people can be great examples, and they can help show us what's possible for ourselves. And tip number 3 is to write this all down. Write down the identity that you are claiming and wanting to take on. It can be as simple as opening up your notes app in your phone and just typing those things out. And you just look at that once a day to help remind yourself. Because if this is not something that we prioritize or think about often, we likely are going to just kind of revert back to our normal way of being because our brain is thinking about all these other things going on. So we want to find a way to help keep this top of mind. Now, to really take on a new identity and to help support that, you are likely going to have to change some of your inner dialogue, to change some of your inner narratives about yourself. What you believe about yourself and what you say to yourself are so important. If you say things like, I'm really bad at that. I'm just not that type of person. That's not me. I'm not consistent. That is not helpful. It is not benefiting you at all to think in those ways. And it's okay if those kind of thoughts come up. Our brains tend to feed us things like that sometimes, and that's okay. It's not about getting rid of those thoughts necessarily, but more about changing your relationship with them, being able to notice them and kind of just let them go and treat them with a level of just observation and neutrality rather than letting it affect how you feel. Really taking on those kinds of narratives or thoughts as your truth. So you want to choose self-talk that supports the identity that you want. Oh, this is just the type of person I am. Of course I can change. Of course I can make that happen. I believe in myself. I trust myself. That was then. This is now. This is just who I am now. And you may also find that it's really helpful and supportive for you to just remind yourself of that identity that you are wanting to step into. Just saying in your head, I am someone who likes a tidy home. I am someone who keeps a tidy home. In your head, you really want to claim whatever it is that you are wanting to change and shift into. And it may take repetition. That's okay. That's part of the process. The second thing that's going to really support your new identity is to act as that person, to show up as that person, to embody that identity. If you tell yourself, I am someone who goes to the gym even when I don't feel like it, then fully take that on and show up as that person and do that thing. And sometimes the simpler the action or change in action, the better. What is one small thing that you can do? It's not about showing up perfectly or doing something to some kind of extreme. It's just about making a change in what you're doing or how you're showing up, right? Showing up in at least a slightly different way. So the new identity can really help change your habits and behaviors, but then making sure to change your habits and behaviors can really support and cement in that new identity. And one aspect of this that is just so important that we talk about is to really step into a new identity. We really are going to have to let go parts of our old identity. And sometimes that is just harder than you might think, which may sound a little confusing because it's like, okay, well, if I really want this thing or want to be this version of myself, why would that be hard? Why would that be a tricky thing to let go of? But with maybe not even being consciously aware of it, we really can be so attached to a certain version of ourselves because that's what we believed about ourselves for so long. That's how we've seen ourselves for so long. And there might be parts of our identity that we really don't want to let go of, but we need to in order for us to be the version of ourselves or to have the kind of outcome or change in our life that we want to have. So for example, I used to be such a foodie. And don't get me wrong, I still really love food, but I was such a foodie to the point where my entire Instagram feed were all the new restaurants popping up in Austin. And one of my absolute favorite things to do was go and try all these really indulgent foods. And within my friend group, I was known as the eater. I could and would eat more than pretty much all of my friends. But between both having some fitness and aesthetic goals, as well as knowing that that way of eating really was not supporting my health, and I've had minor health issues for forever, there came a point where I realized I couldn't really be that version of me anymore. Or at least I had a decision to make. I could continue being that person and living my life in that way, or I could let that part of me go and become the version of me who really prioritized eating really healthy. And I ultimately chose to become a really healthy eater, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't hard or that there wasn't some discomfort in letting that version of me go. Let the previous version of you go. It'll just make the whole process so much easier. That version of ourselves got us to where we are now. And if we are wanting to change something, then we're going to have to let her go. And throughout this process, expect some discomfort and some resistance. If you feel uncomfortable or find yourself wanting to slip back into familiar ways, just know that is so normal. It is so much easier for us to fall into old patterns rather than to create new ones because the brain just prefers what's familiar because it associates it with safety. But when you find yourself feeling those ways or maybe starting to play out an old familiar pattern, those are the important moments of choosing to stretch yourself instead. It is okay if these things feel a little unnatural or uncomfortable or just not quite like you. Shedding old skin tends to be uncomfortable. And there might be times where this little voice in your head is telling you why that's not who you really are, or giving you reasons to not do those new habits. But in those moments, you can decide how you respond to those thoughts, and you can decide what you really want. And in those moments of maybe feeling uncomfortable or some version of resistance is popping up, I found it could be really helpful to then switch into a headspace of being so excited to be this new version of you. You do not owe anyone else an explanation for deciding to change. People close to you may make comments because they know you as a certain version of you. They see you through a certain lens, and that lens includes their own internal projections. So they may make comments when you show up in ways that they may not expect, and that's okay. But you don't need to let anyone else's expectations of you or views of you affect what you do or who you decide to be. Others' opinions are just noise. That is for them to handle. And all that really matters is that you show up for yourself in the way that you want to. And the last tip I have for you is to do new things. The more newness and change you can bring into your life, the better, because that ultimately makes it easier for us to change how we're showing up, to change our typical ways of being. So go new places, try a new hobby, make changes to your routines. And it really doesn't have to be anything huge or extreme. It really can be making small tweaks to your morning routine and your evening routine, changing the route that you go to work. But the more you can switch up your typical day-to-day life, the easier you might find it is for you to show up in a new identity. So I hope this clarifies how you can change your identity and self-concept to help you show up differently and make the changes that you want to in your life. If you found this video helpful or got any kind of value from it, please let me know by giving it a like or leaving a comment below. That just helps me know what is resonating with you. And if you know that you want to change some of your habits and live more intentionally and step into a 2.0 version of you, make sure to hit subscribe for future videos. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I will see you in another one. Bye.